In the spring of 1945, Nazi Germany suffered a crushing defeat in World War II. Berlin fell. Adolf Hitler committed suicide on April 30, 1945, and shortly thereafter, Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Allies in early May 1945. Allied forces moved quickly to sweep up the remaining pockets of Nazi resistance in Europe. Simultaneously, they began arresting Nazi officials, from high-ranking Reich leaders to concentration camp commanders, to be tried for the war crimes committed by the regime. Across the continent, Nazi concentration camps were liberated by the Allies. American, Soviet, and British soldiers were horrified by what they found. The surviving prisoners were generally emaciated, sick, and traumatized. In the Dachau camp, for example, living conditions for prisoners had deteriorated drastically in the final months of the war, exacerbated by a typhus epidemic and the overcrowding of prisoners from other camps. On April 29, 1945, the Dachau concentration camp was officially liberated by U.S. Army forces. The scene inside was truly horrific. Allied soldiers found piles of corpses throughout the camp. It was reported that some 3,000 bodies were strewn about, while thousands of other prisoners were near death in a vegetative state due to starvation and torture. The stench of decomposition filled the camp's air. Even before entering the gates of Dachau, American soldiers had discovered a death train from Buchenwald that had stopped near the camp. Its cars were filled with hundreds of corpses of prisoners who had starved to death during the long 20-day journey from the Buchenwald camp. Even Allied soldiers who were accustomed to the harshness of combat could not contain their emotions upon seeing the horror in the camp. Felix Sparks, a battalion commander from the 45th Infantry Division, who participated in the liberation of Dachau, reported, "The first moments of our entry into the camp were ones of profound shock. Some of the men, battle-hardened veterans, cried, others raged." Among the perpetrators of atrocities at the Dachau camp who were captured, one name that emerged was Michael Redwitz. He was an SS officer who held a key position in the structure of the Dachau concentration camp. When the Allied military tribunal was later convened to try the perpetrators at Dachau, Redwitz was accused of holding one of the most important positions in the camp hierarchy and being directly responsible for the brutal conditions of the prisoners there. But who was Michael Redwitz and what role did he play in the crimes at the concentration camp? Michael Redwitz was born on August 14, 1900 in Bayreuth, Germany. He came of age during the turmoil of post-World War I Germany. From a young age, Redwitz was involved in the Nazi movement. He first joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party in September 1925, just a few years after Hitler pioneered the movement. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, Redwitz entered Germany's regular military service. He served in the Wehrmacht as a career officer from 1934 to 1938. However, his ideological inclination was clear. After a few years in the regular army, Redwitz transferred to the SS, the Nazi elite force, in 1938. His career in the SS advanced rapidly. In a short period, he was promoted to SS Hauptsturmführer, a captain in the SS, in 1941. In addition, Redwitz also received the Golden Nazi Party badge, an honor for loyal, long-serving members, as well as the War Merit Cross Second Class for his service. Redwitz's career in the concentration camp system began shortly after he joined the SS. From late 1938, he was assigned to KZ Mauthausen in Austria, one of the most notoriously brutal concentration camps. In 1940, Redwitz led the Postal Service unit at Mauthausen, perhaps not a primary role, but it gave him experience in the camp environment. Then, in February 1941, he was transferred to become the Schutzhaftlagerführer at KZ Gusen, a subcamp of Mauthausen that functioned as a forced labor camp. The position of Schutzhaftlagerführer meant Redwitz was responsible for the Schutzhaft prisoners, political or racial prisoners held for protective custody in Nazi terminology. In essence, he directly supervised the daily lives of the prisoners and the enforcement of camp rules. Redwitz's performance led to him being entrusted with positions in various camps. In early April 1942, he was promoted to camp adjutant and Schutzhaftlagerführer at Ravensbrück. As the camp commandant's adjutant and head of prisoner affairs, Redwitz played a major role in running the camp's administration and ensuring the commandant's orders were carried out in the barracks. He held this position for only a few months, because on November 20th, 1942, Michael Redwitz was transferred to Dachau, this time receiving the top position of Erster Schutzhaftlagerführer, or First Protective Custody Camp Leader, at the Dachau concentration camp. Holding the position of Erster Schutzhaftlagerführer in Dachau meant Redwitz was the camp commandant's right-hand man in internal prisoner affairs. He was directly under the Lagerkommandant and controlled the other Schutzhaftlagerführer beneath him. In other words, Redwitz oversaw all daily operations of the camp related to the prisoners. His duties included organizing the morning and evening roll calls, where thousands of prisoners were forced to stand for hours in the open square to be counted, and ensuring the cruel camp regulations were mercilessly enforced. In mid-March 1944, Redwitz left his post at Dachau. He was briefly reassigned to KZ Buchenwald for about 5 months in 1944. At Buchenwald, his role is not well documented, but he was part of the SS staff there when the camp was holding a massive number of prisoners due to evacuations from the Eastern Front. Towards the end of 1944, as the war neared Germany's defeat, Redwitz was finally pulled to the front lines. Beginning in August 1944, he served as a soldier in the Waffen-SS on the Western Front. This assignment was likely because the Nazis were running out of combat personnel and were pulling some camp officers to fight against the advancing Allies. After the war ended, the Allies moved quickly to bring justice for the victims of the Holocaust. At the site of the former Dachau camp, the U.S. military held a series of war crimes trials against Nazi concentration camp officials and staff. The first and largest case was the Dachau camp trial, held on the former campgrounds from November 15th to December 13th, 1945. Michael Redwitz was a defendant in this trial, along with 39 others. In the official indictment read by the prosecutor, Redwitz and the other defendants were accused of violations of the laws and usages of war. Specifically, they were charged with war crimes for their actions against civilians and Allied prisoners of war at the Dachau concentration camp and its subcamps between early 1942 and late April 1945. Testifying in his own case, Redwitz admitted to having been present at 40 executions. On December 13, 1945, he was sentenced to death by hanging. On May 29, 1946, at Landsberg Prison, Michael Redwitz was executed. He was led to the gallows along with several other convicts from the Dachau trial. With a rope around his neck, Redwitz met the end of his life, at the age of 45, in the same place where many Nazi victims had also died. The hanging was carried out by a U.S. military execution team, delivering justice in the name of the victims. According to records, Redwitz's body was later handed over to his family and buried in Munich.